Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Chicago Doctor Who Meetup YouTube channel. My name is Gordon, and you're probably wondering, what is the Chicago Doctor Who Meetup? Well, we're a group of Chicago and suburban Doctor Who fans who get together and we meet up. I mean, it's right in the name. We do these virtual in person in Chicago when it's warmer, and we do them virtually all year round because we know that not everyone lives in Chicago. And so why are we here? Well, we're piloting an idea about, and it's, we have a Patreon that helps support our expenses, but we also wanted to have a way to bring people in to get a sense of what meetups are like. So we thought, okay, well, why don't we just do one of the perks for paid and free members is every month we alternate between a screening and a hangout. So we are holding a very special screening. This will go out via Patreon and YouTube, so you can get a chance to see who we are, what we're about, and learn about some Doctor Who episodes that you might want to watch. And also is a great way for you to join Patreon. I'll be sure we have all the links down below, so you can check us out online and get to know us. So why don't we go around? I have some members with me, so why don't we introduce ourselves by first name only? Again, I'm Gordon.
Hello, I'm Harmon.
I'm Ruth.
Hello, I'm Barbara.
Okay, and we decided that um, I'm springing this last minute. We were going to talk about another episode, but we're going to talk about the war games tonight. Just
Uh-oh.
kidding. No, just kidding. Actually, our episode selection tonight is actually very timely because it appeared 41 years ago. And it kicked off the 25th season of Doctor Who and its remembrance of the Daleks. And Harmon was the member who selected it. So, Harmon, can you tell us a little bit about why you chose this particular episode?
Um, I chose this one because it's such a perfect episode to illustrate the Sylvester McCoy's Doctor, and I love the chemistry between him and Ace, and also because when you look at the new Doctor Who that we're watching, and then you watch this after having seen some of that, it puts things into a new context. It's like this is where the Time War maybe began. It for me, it's kind of an episode that lets you bridge from the old to the new series in a way as well.
Hmm. So with everyone else, what are your general thoughts about this episode?
I really liked it. I think this is like the one I've seen it before, I believe. Because I was like right away, I was like, wait, I know this episode, but it was a really great introduction to Sylvester McCoy, and I just love his way of pronouncing things, the way those R's roll. I was just like right away, I'm like, I'm gonna just really enjoy this Doctor. But also the interaction between Ace and him, and even like, man, the interactions today, it just felt so timely to like what's happening today, to the point where I literally saw like a meme with a screenshot from the episode of Ace being told my body, my choice, and her responding, my body, my bat. And I was just like, this is just so perfect. Because I'm like, yeah, that's pretty much how she would react. I'm like, I can tell after one episode alone. But even like just Ace throughout the episode where she's just kind of figuring out the one guy is a Nazi, and she's kind of like, wait a minute. And she just the scene where she sees the sign in the window that says no colors. And she's just like, you can see the little wheels in her head turn. And she's just like, wait a minute.
Hmm. Yeah.
I liked something about Ace was I'll use the phrase she's badass.
Hmm.
And I liked that. And I liked how the doctor in this story is very paternal, the way he looks after her.
Hmm. Yeah, I like the fact that it starts with this is the first episode of the season, so the last time we you would have seen Ace would have been in Dragonfire, where she's all aboard the TARDIS and she's going in, and there's no scene of like them learning to get along. It just starts with them automatically getting along, and the Doctor scolding her for having her boombox with her.
Yeah, because of the possible damage to the timeline if somebody,
Mhm.
if somebody discovered it and things happened, or and the whole microchip revolution would happen early, and that line where he points out even the Daleks with all their evil, desires and everything, they think twice before just cutting the earth in half because
Mhm.
they don't want to break the timeline either.
Mhm.
So that it's kind of it was the, there were moments in this. It's moments like that. Those are lines that you could hear in David Tennant or somebody giving in the new series as well. That's kind of it. I don't know what the rest of you think, but the way this episode moved in terms of energy also kind of reminded me of some of the new series as well.
Mhm.
Yeah, it had a good flow. And I could see the parallels between like the old episode, like this one, and like the newer stuff too. Um, I really did catch on to the paternal like Ace and the doctor's relationship. It is really cute, and like I mean, even when he's like telling her to get away from the window, she's just like hurrying up as fast as she could against around the tables, and he's just like right there to help her.
It's just lots of little. There's a moment they're
Yeah.
having a conversation. And I don't remember what it was he says, but after she says something, he just like does this on her nose. And there were just there was body language and gestures. And when she, and running away from the Daleks, she jumps through a window. She's hurt
Mhm.
herself, and he sends everybody else away, and he's looking after her ankle and giving her the speech. When I tell you to stay put, that means stay put. And again, but the whole way he approaches it is, like I said, this very paternal thing. And the other
Oh,
thing I love is how she can't stand how she's told in Dragonfire. Three rules the doctor gives her. One of them is he's in charge. The second one is I'm not the professor, I'm the doctor. But she still calls him the professor. And because she knows it's her way of it's that's what's so great about the relationship. I can't think of the word for it, but it's her way of needling him all the time.
it's like that cutesy nickname you give someone that you really love, but like it annoys them. But it's like you've said it once, now you can't stop calling them that, and it just kind of becomes a thing, like a termite. But even like when she's like like she's talking about how she hasn't eaten, and she's about to head off, and he's just like, wait a minute, and like gives her money. He's just like, no, wait, you need cash, and she's just like,
I'm
thanks.
sorry. My computer is not working right. I'm going to have to back out of the meeting. I'm sorry.
No problem, Barbara.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
Thanks for coming, Barbara.
Thanks for coming.
Yep, and if you've been to any of the meetups, you'll know sometimes we do have tech glitches, but not too often. But we understand. But let's get back to the episode. Yeah, I remember seeing this. If my memory serves, I first saw it in '91 because Doctor Who, WTTW, I think, was doing a limited run after not having rights to the series for a while, and I think they showed this. They showed I think they showed Unearthly Child. They probably would have shown the Crotons because that was the only Troughton they had. I think they showed Day of the Daleks because John Pertwee had just passed away. Um, I'm trying to remember the Tom Baker episodes. I think they showed Earthshock for um Peter Davison. I'm trying to think what I don't remember what they showed for Colin Baker, but this and Survival were the two Sylvester
Yeah,
McCoys because they were premiering in Chicago. And the thing I love about this, it is just so I had seen a few years ago, I think WTTW was just burning through what they had because they went through a lot of the old black and white stuff. And I had seen Colin Baker stuff, and it just felt just kind of, you know, it didn't really feel like Doctor Who at the time. But you watch this and it's just so bright and there's an energy to it. And I mean, it's also written because it was the anniversary year. Like there's like you can tell that the writer grew up during the Pertwee era because there's like the parallels in terms of the characters. Captain Gilmore's the Brigadier. Um, uh,
The woman from Cambridge who's the
yes,
scientific advisor is oh no, I'm forgetting her name. Uh,
Professor Rachel something or other.
right, but I mean she represents the Pertwee's first companion.
Well, I would say she's the doctor and Allison is her companion. But yeah, the Cambridge is a reference to Liz Shaw.
Liz
Um,
Shaw, that's right.
even
Yeah, the
even
Lisha
yeah,
reference.
even the traitor is a sergeant named Mike.
Oh
Oh,
yes,
that's
Captain.
great.
Oh, Captain Mike Yates at some point.
Hmm.
That's right. I didn't make that reference.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it's yeah, and it's I think the great thing about this episode is that it is, I think, a lot of I think a lot of previous Dalek episodes up to this point, I would say between Genesis, in the Tom Baker era and now, is that a lot of them, and when I say a lot, it's like two, because there's Resurrection of the Daleks and Revelation of the Daleks, and Destiny of the Daleks. They really weren't all that. They weren't great. It was this kind of feeling of it was like almost the obligatory Dalek story. It was like, okay, Destiny was okay. Well, we had Davros. We should probably bring him back, and yeah, we got to throw some Daleks in. Resurrection is Eric Sayward saying, okay, how can I use these Daleks and throw in some more space mercenaries and stuff? Because we all know Eric Sayward loves his space mercenaries. In fact, Eric Sayward and his space mercenaries was the name of my old ska band from high school. So, not just kidding. And Revelation, at least for me, was a lot of people have think of it think of it this way. Sayward has said that Revelation was based on what he took from the novel The Loved One. I'd much rather see the movie The Loved One, which I thoroughly love, than watch Revelation. But I think Remembrance does a couple of things. Now it plays with the show's history, but I think it also, kind of going back to what Ruth said, it kind of serves as like it uses the Daleks in a very direct allegory versus kind of the more generic kind of um kind of
Yeah,
yeah,
like you literally have a black one set of Daleks is black, one is white, and then you have the no color sign later, and then the trader going, um, you know, people like us, like we gotta keep here, and then literally the you have the other one guy who is in league with the Daleks, literally going like, I was running a trader for my view of the war. And it's
yeah,
just like that man is Nazi. I was literally like, so they're basically saying without saying the quiet part out loud, this guy's a Nazi and he's teaming up with
Yeah.
Daleks who are based on Nazis. I was just like, yep,
yeah,
I love
and
this.
yeah, and it comes into it's interesting because at the time, at the actual time in the late 50s, early 60s in England, you had, if I remember my British history, you were having an influx of people coming in from Jamaica, from India,
Hmm.
basically brown skinned people. And so
Yeah.
there's a lot of pushback in the culture. And so in the fact, I think it was like 68 or 69, there was a British politician named Enoch Powell. And if anyone out there is watching who knows British history of the 60s, please correct me because I know I'm getting this wrong. Um, who gave an inf okay, here's your obscure Sky reference. So Enoch Powell is a British politician who gives a speech called, it's known as the Rivers of Blood speech in terms of incoming immigrants who are brown skinned. And it is precisely what you think it is.
I've
And
watched Call the Midwife. They reference it.
okay, so
And then I looked it up.
yeah, and that, but there are people who are going to be watching this on
Yeah.
YouTube who probably, and
Yeah.
so
But
later on, Eric Clapton is at a concert and he is talking about, and I'm not going to use the actual words, but he's referring to brown-skinned people by specific British epithets and specific slurs. And this is a guy who basically built his career on the music of people of color, black people. And a lot of working class kids kind of got angry and said, this is, this is
Yeah.
BS. So you not only not only did you have the first rock against racism in England, there are a lot of kids who listen to like ska music, which is Jamaican pop music. So ska started taking off in the late 70s, not as an antidote to punk, but it was kind of like you had your punks, you had people like, oh, we like this stuff, we're going to go into ska. So, but it's interesting how you have this. I think it's interesting in the early 60s because around this the fact is this is an episode that is slightly, I wouldn't say it's nostalgic, but it knows how to turn that nostalgia on its side. It's like, yeah, this is all, in the original cut. It's not included in like the to be cut or other releases due to rights issues, but they used Beatles songs. So you think, okay, there's pop music, it's fashion, but there's an undercurrent, as you said, Ruth, of racism, of the fact that you've got these two factions, um, and there's also a really clever fake out. Like, what did we think about the whole revelation of? Did either of you think when first watching it that the person at the Dalek battle computer was Davros or just another Dalek? Did either
I
of you
was
think
thinking
that?
Dar Darvis. That's what I was
Yeah,
thinking. And then the reveal of the little girl was just like, that's clever.
yeah, and what I liked about that is both the things that the doctor points out like that, and then someone will make a comment about it, and he's like, it's obscene. It's like he just comes right out and says, yeah, the Daleks have this weakness. They're all logic and also zero compassion. So what do? You take a child with imagination, plug it into a battle computer so that you can get some ideas, create creativity, and make this child a slave. And again, right there, a whole bunch of um, themes going on. But I just liked how, yeah, the way the voice was done, you couldn't tell was maybe that Davros. And of course, it's not. He's actually the emperor, quote unquote, Dalek on the ship.
Yeah, it was a good fake out. And also we kept seeing the girl, so we knew something was up with the little girl, but we couldn't quite say. So it was interesting like how they finally did it, which the casting of that kid was like so perfect.
Yeah.
She did such a great job.
Yeah, and that even when she was watching them dig up the hand of Omega, um, I mean the people who are, it's her people who are doing it, but still they don't know that she's keeping an eye on them. I mean, even though they're working for her, it's one of the things I liked is the Daleks' distrust of humans. They're using them and they're working with them and they're promising them things, but still they only care about their own ends. And in this episode, when the doctor is explaining to Ace what's going on and that the Daleks are following him, and he was trying to set, he's many steps ahead of them. That's another thing in Doctor Who where the doctor is all these steps ahead. And in this episode, he's really far ahead because he knows why they're following him. He knows what they want, so he's going to let them have it so that he can. But it's got to be the correct group of Daleks. When he finds out there's two of them factions, he's like, well, that messes up my whole plan because I got to make sure the correct group gets it, i.e., the
White
one with,
ones.
well, yeah, the one with the Emperor Dalek, who's going to definitely be, him. I think he even knew it was probably Davros. Um, and he wanted the ones that would definitely use it. And in the way he thought they'd want to use it to become like Time Lords. Gordon, I'm not sure you have sound there.
Hello?
Oh, you're
Yes.
good now.
You're back.
Okay. So, kind of building on that point, I know there are a lot of people who dislike this episode for a couple of reasons. And part of it is that the Doctor becomes a lot more, in their view, he's manipulative. I mean, I think, would it be fair to say that we all see him as more like being one or two steps ahead of the Daleks? Um, but it also points out to, this is also the first inklings of what would later be known as the Cartmel Master Plan. And I'm speaking specifically of the scene in the staircase where Ace and the Doctor are talking about the Hand of Omega. Um, and I guess we've all we've all watched Doctor Who episodes. How do we feel about the idea that this might have been leading towards more of a like a kind of a Doctor who's playing four-dimensional chess with his enemies? How do we feel like he's being manipulative, or is he just being like just a Doctor who's smarter this time?
No, it's definitely manipulative. And part of the thing there is when he's having the whole conversation with Davros, and then how does he basically infuriates Davros to the point where then he's like, "Oh, Davros, no, no, don't use the hand, don't use the hand." And it's this thing where the Doctor essentially, he's trying to give them a chance, don't do it, don't do it, but he wants them to do it. And he essentially manipulates, he knows the personality of his enemy. He manipulates them into doing it. And then Davros is like, "You tricked me." And Doctor's like, "You tricked yourself." But I'm like, I don't know. It's a little of both.
Yeah, he definitely had a plan this time, which is unusual for the Doctor. I mean, 13 literally is just like, I'll just make this up as I go along. We'll figure it out.
But there's also another important scene in this story, and that's where he's in this cafe and he's getting his tea. And the individual giving it to him says, "Well, would you like some sugar in your tea?" And the Doctor's like, "Ah, a decision." And goes into this whole speech about, but if the boulder drops in the river or the lake, then there's all these ripples, and ripples go against ripples, and unknown consequences to a decision. And the bigger the decision, the bigger the consequences. And it's this heavy burden. This is the other thing about this character, this is when you really get introduced to this idea that, okay, he has this heavy burden, and he knows that this decision, even though he's a Time Lord and he can maybe see ahead and get a grasp of what's coming here, he's not entirely sure where this is going to lead. And even now, he's manipulating the Daleks, but should he? That's what I kind of read into that, is he's trying, he's got this decision. He doesn't have to go ahead with it. But then what I like is the guy behind the counter saying, "Yeah, life's like that. Get on with it." And I like how the Doctor, for all this, he's manipulative, I think, but he also questions what he's doing. But I like that moment, which is like any other major decision in life. It's like, yeah, you can't be paralyzed. Unfortunately, you have to make the decision and go for it. That's what I like about this episode. It's not the Doctor's character is not, oh, he's just purely devious and manipulative. No, he's also contemplating the consequences of what he's doing. The more full character.
Yeah, and I think it also helps that this is a Doctor who, at this point, the character has been through so many phases, both in terms of, he starts as, he's just come off, the Colin Baker years where, the idea was he starts as abrasive and then kind of eases his way into being pleasant. But the series was also one of the things that the script editor, Andrew Cartmel, didn't like about Doctor Who in the past was that the Doctor, in his words, the Doctor was always a chump. The Doctor was someone who things happened to versus someone who was kind of not only driving the story, but that we knew too much about him. So I think this is where you see that kind of I think having that kind of doubt about, okay, yeah, I could, it's kind of the question of why doesn't the doctor just take the Daleks out?
Mhm.
And so you've got a doctor who's thinking about it. And to me, this is a really, it really, I think, is a commentary on Genesis of the Daleks back in the 70s, because the very last episode is the fourth doctor with the two wires. Have I the right? He chooses not to, but then things happen where he's like, oh, you know what? This is bad. I got to go back and do it. And
Yeah, because
he only
he's reminded how evil the Daleks are.
right. And he does it, but it's only a delay. I think here, because there's a later commentary in Silver Nemesis where Ace says, oh, you're going to do that thing to the Cybermen that you did to the Daleks. And the doctor's like, yep. Except here is much more of he's not doing it on a mission for the Time Lords. We don't know why he's doing it. We get the sense that maybe he was a little bit more involved with the Hand of Omega because he says, didn't we have trouble with the prototype? Not, oh man, they had problems or
Yeah,
and I
he
think
corrects himself on that.
Yeah.
But
right. And there's this great little I think it shows I think it's an element to the doctor where it shows his age, I think. And there's similar speeches with Matt Smith and with Jodie Whittaker in
Mhm.
Villa Diodati, where say what you will about the script itself, but she's talking about how Lord Byron, his words will inspire people, blah blah blah, and she says this is not a ladder, this is not a lateral leadership structure. This is a mountain, and I'm at the summit, and I got to make this decision. I mean, you can cite plenty of Matt Smith, um, Peter Capaldi in the Zygon inversion, where in front of the two boxes, where it's like, hey, this is war, this is what you want, or it's that kind of what we see is a doctor the first time who is not just he's not a straightforward hero in the way that say Peter Davison was, but he's not an outright villain. He's more a guy who knows you can tell that there's an age there and an experience where he's like, okay, do I really want to do this? Like that the only equivalent might be um at least when you look at something like Power of the Daleks. You can find by the way, for those watching on YouTube, we'll have links to Remembrance on Tubi down there, but in Power of the Daleks, it starts with the doctor post regeneration being told, oh, am I the doctor? Um, and all throughout, he's like challenging Polly and Ben. And at the end, it's like Ben asks, "Oh, you knew that was going to happen. You decided to come here." He's like, "Did I?" And I think there's that. But I think there is that sense of with McCoy, and I think that's why I think a lot of the new series pulled from this is that you can't just have a straightforward. I think McCoy kind of helped change the character from being kind of a straightforward, I'm going to be a hero to, oh, there are decisions that need to be made, and I got to be the one to make them.
Kind of like reflected a little bit to like a lesser degree in Pompeii,
Hmm.
and where we know the choice the doctor has to make. He knows it. It's very clear. It's the question is he going to do it?
Hmm. And
But
there,
then even then, Donna is pointing out, well, yeah, you had to make this choice, but you can also choose to save a few people while you're at it. Like it doesn't have to be as bad as you think.
Mhm.
So then
well,
we definitely see kind of the ripples and stuff. And I can definitely see how this episode reflects on like more current Doctor Who.
I definitely can see how Russell Davies watched this episode and, like I said, got inspired for the whole idea of the time war, but also
Mm.
of the more deeper dimensions to the character. And, when they did the 50th anniversary, they picked, Stephen Moffat picked one episode to represent each Doctor. He picked Pyramid of Mars for Tom Baker's, but he picked this one for Sylvester McCoy. And so I watched this episode. I had seen Remembrance of the Daleks, I think, first when it was on WTTW, but my sister had never seen it. And we were watching these episodes that Moffat had picked for the early Doctors. So she'd never seen Sylvester McCoy's Doctor. And we watched that one together. And she immediately remarked to me how alike, how she, her favorite was always Tom Baker. And this was now kind of, she could see why Sylvester McCoy could be somebody's, new favorite in a sense, because he captured all the dimensions of the humor and seriousness of the character. And also, I think her observation was just that it was amazing to her how she picked up as well on how that episode immediately made her think about how things were done in the new series. But the other thing I remembered was Moffat gave an introduction, and he said basically that one of the other reasons he picked this episode was that Sylvester McCoy in his first season, the actor, looked back on how he had been portraying the Doctor and thought he was doing it wrong. And so this was your first taste of him reinventing the character himself, because I guess if you go back to the previous season, you'll see some of the Colin Baker personality still in his Doctor. And it is a great thing that the actor was like, I'm doing this wrong. I'm going to change how I do this character. And it worked.
Yeah, and I think it also helped too, because that he and Andrew Cartmel were kind of pretty simpatico. Because I know that like with Colin Baker and Eric Sayward did not want Colin Baker to be hired, thought he was a bad doctor. And unfortunately, someone should have told Eric that that's not his job to approve of a doctor. It's his job to write for that doctor. But when you look at that first McCoy season, there's only one real, in my opinion, one real clunker, which is Time in the Ronnie, but that was made as a just in case because they weren't sure if the series was coming back. And as Cartmel's hired, you can see in that series, people tend to basically like give it slag it and just mock it. You can see where Cartmel's trying to right the ship, and it may not always work out, but you can at least see where they're putting the effort into, okay, we're thinking about this differently. You've got Paradise Towers, which is, it's easy to see it as a rough draft for Happiness Patrol, which comes right after this story. But Paradise Towers is also adapting a J.G. Ballard novel. And for those who don't know, he is a very intellectual science fiction writer.
Yeah.
After that is Delta and the Bannermen, which is dealing with, it's basically light and frothy, and it's like an episode of Glee done in Wales in the 1950s. But like it starts with the bustle of aliens getting killed, which is, I mean, it's and you go, what? It's easy to see that, but at least they're trying to do something that's a little bit more. And then there's Dragonfire, which is kind of it tells a Doctor Who story in a different way. And you kind of see where that first series, I think, is Cartmel trying to get used to it. And there's also that first series, because John Nathan Turner was so into light entertainment, he wanted to keep the humor. He wanted to keep it like that. So Cartmel was trying to turn the Doctor in a different direction. I think McCoy, as you said, Harlan, saw in a different direction. So I think they started working simpatico to give the Doctor a little bit more depth than he had before. And it helps that you can argue whether the writing was consistent throughout the McCoy era. But I think it'd be fair to say this is when a lot of people have said, oh, they really like the McCoy era. I think they secretly wish that not only was this the first episode of McCoy ever, but this, in my opinion, this should have been the 25th anniversary episode.
This one, you mean what we're talking
Yes.
about? Remembrance. Yeah. And there is nostalgia. Well, there's nostalgia all over the place in this
Hmm.
episode and homages to all sorts of commentary in the past. For example, when that Dalek is coming for them in the basement, and the doctor's like, the stairs. And I'm like, yeah, that was this. I'm thinking again of my sister. This was the joke always with the Daleks is all you have to do is go up a flight of stairs to get away from them. And even in Destiny of the Daleks, after Tom Baker's doctor climbs up the shaft, he looks down and he's like, hey, if you're the superior life form in the universe, why don't you just climb up after me? And so in this one, when they go for the stairs, to then have the Dalek be able to, anti-gravity, whatever, elevate and go after them.
Oh,
And that to me was literally saying, this is where, you use the phrase, Gordon, fan candy. This entire episode is fan candy. At the same time, it's a very good episode. The whole, this that's what I like about this, is you can actually do something for the fans and write something that's a really good story all at the same time.
Well, it's not just fan candy or fan service in the story. If you look at the actors, the actress who plays the professor, Professor Rachel, and I'm forgetting her last name, is Pamela Salem, who was previously in The Robots of Death as Tus. The
Mm.
schoolmaster is Michael. He was Lawrence Scarman in Pyramids of Mars. In fact, he had several roles
Oh,
throughout Doctor Who.
I didn't make
Um,
that connection. Interesting.
the old the blind priest, and I'm forgetting his name. It's Peter something or other. People on YouTube, if you're watching, you know the names, stick them down there. Yeah, I'm failing my Who fanboy card, but he's also one of those. He was in Carnival of Monsters. He was Packer in The Invasion. He did a couple of voices. I know he did voices for the Aliens and Ambassadors of Death, but he was like big in the
Hmm.
like the Troughton Pertwee era. And I hate that I'm
There's a
blanking on
lot.
his name.
So there's a lot more homages to the history of the
mhm.
show in here than I didn't know any of that.
Yeah,
That's
and the guy
interesting.
who in the diner scene with Sylvester McCoy. Fun fact, he ended up playing the uncle on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. So there's Will Smith's one degree of connection to Doctor Who.
That's why he looked familiar to
Yeah, I was trying to place them too.
me. But and the other thing I was going to say, going back to this whole nostalgia thing, was also how they set up this. Okay, the Doctor left behind the Hand of Omega. He had to leave suddenly. Unearthly child. We all know why he had to
Yeah.
leave suddenly. But it's interesting how when he comes back, it's just interesting how they sort of they sort of hinted at some reasons why he may have left Gallifrey, but then at the same time, it's like created a whole new set of questions, because one of the themes for this whole 25th season is this idea that the Doctor, like with the Silver Nemesis, it's all this stuff that he's involved with, that there's a whole new era of mystery to the character, of all the things he's done that have all these important consequences and all these important decisions he's going around the universe and making. And then with that also comes this discussion he has where they ask him how he can just wire technology together like it's no big deal, and he's like, oh, it's easy when you have 900 years experience. And there's something else I liked is here the Doctor is just doing things so effortlessly that John Pertwee's Doctor would, take a lot longer to do and explain what he's doing and explain how hard it is. The Doctor's just doing it. And
Just pulled out wires and was just like, dude.
well, and when he goes into the Dalek shuttlecraft and the Dalek is wired into it and can't disengage, and it's like intruder, intruder, and then it's like figures out, oh, you're the Doctor. I need to exterminate the Doctor. And he's like, he puts his hat on the eye stalk and he's like, yes, I'm the Doctor. And it's everything it's saying, and then it starts saying exterminate, and the Doctor's like, exterminate, you know, as it's, and it's like he's just doing this like it's effortless. And it's another example of when you see what the Doctor is capable of doing in the new series. It wasn't just with the new series that they came up with some of that. You see it here
Mhm.
with this character.
Well, even there's the Cool House School. I caught that the headmaster offers him a job as a caretaker, and I'm just like, oh my gosh, the 12th Doctor later became the caretaker, and I'm like, I love that there's like
Yeah,
little
it,
things like that in the new series, and it's such a small detail, but it's just like watching it, I'm just like, what?
I think Moffat actually got the idea from that.
Yeah.
I think and it wouldn't surprise me. And I picked up, that's what I mean when I watched this episode with having the new series. I watch it always and realize, wow, so many things have been inspired just from this one story.
Hmm.
Yeah, and the interesting thing is this is the Ben Aronovich who wrote this. I think this was his first ever television script.
His pacing's really good.
And I think I mean there's a lot in this. I think one of the great things about this story and the script is that there's not a wasted moment. I mean, even scenes
Yeah.
where like the where Allison and Rachel are wondering, "Oh, okay, why are we here? What are we doing?" It's not about being futile. They um it's like Aronovich is saying, "Okay, yeah, I can't think of anything for them to do, so let's address it." And I think that the idea of um I think I kind of think that the fact that the script moves at such a pace, like, how do we get into this garage type deal where Ratcliffe is in? 3 words, special weapons Dalek. Or it's basically just a Dalek with a big ass gun.
Yeah.
Um,
And,
Also, he made
and,
a Dalek race war.
and I saw that and I'm
It was
like,
a
okay,
race war.
why didn't they do that in the first place is sort of what went through my mind. You know, you're going to be up against, uh, you know, numbers.
well, I think more than likely it was budget because by this time Doctor Who was only doing about um, I think 14 to 16 episodes a season because that's post Trial of a Time Lord. And I think the way they did it, and this is a theory, is that usually with a series you'd have um, like when you go back to like Tom Baker, you'd have a bunch of 4 episodes and a 6 episode story. And I'm sure in looking at developing scripts, one of the things about John Nathan Turner is as a storyteller, he's meh. I mean, he hired Eric Sayward thinking, oh, this guy could do the job. But he started as a production assistant manager, which is the guy who watches the budget. He's the guy who's like, uh, Harmon, you're spending too much on floor wax for this particular set. We're not going to see the floor. Stop it. You know what? We don't need um, Ruth. We don't need glitter. Just run some tinfoil through a paper shredder. That'll do. That kind of thing. Um, and I think what he realized is okay. It's it's let's see, 8. So it's like okay, we've got enough for 2 4-parters and a 6-parter. I've got an idea. Let's split that 6-parter, split the budget into 2 3-parters. One can be all outdoors and one can be all indoors. Because that's how Doctor Who was shot a lot of times, is you do location shooting, then you do studio shooting and you put it together. So it was kind of this, it's why like when you look at the following season, Battlefield is a 4-parter that should be 3 parts. Um, Ghostlight is a 3-parter that should be 4 parts. Curse of Fenric is the right length. Survival's
Yeah.
the right length. But back to Resurrection, to Remembrance of the Daleks. Yeah, I think it pretty much fills its runtime with there isn't a false note in this entire story. I mean, would that be a fair
Yeah.
assessment?
No, I agree. This is one that, like I said, it moves in everything. I mean, he uses this after he destroys the transmat using the bat, and the bat breaks, and he tosses it away, and he says, "Weapons always useless in the end." And then Rachel and the other woman who's with her, they're like, and so the doctor, flips up their mouths, is like, "Lunch?" But
That
no,
seems
that
amazing.
no, I mean, I loved it because yeah, they're looking at they're just their jaws literally dropped, and he's just like, "Hey, let's go get lunch."
Let's
And
keep
it's
going.
that's my point, is not a moment wasted, not a gesture wasted, especially Sylvester McCoy. Every line, there's too many unforgettable lines in this story, and yet they all work. Um, and yeah, it's a very well written. That's why I was saying it's a very well written story that keeps, in so many ways, harkening back. For example, one of the ongoing themes with the Doctor is where he'll build some gadget and be surprised if it actually works. And so he builds something in this episode to disrupt the Daleks, to weaken them so they temporarily. And when he rushes in to use that to save Ace from the Daleks, he's like, "It works! It actually works!" And it's like, I'm just like, yeah, that's it's another. But the way Sylvester McCoy does it also is that he's like a child. Is this 900-year-old, very serious, got heavy decisions child, all at the same time. And that's Tom Baker did that. Characters like David Tennant did that. Matt Smith did that. Matt Smith was great, the young person with the old soul.
Mhm.
Here, Sylvester McCoy carries that old soul like, yeah, so what? Who I am. He
The
just kind
way
of,
he just sees the van at the beginning of the episode, it was just like, this is new, different and new and kind of out of place. Let me just sneak in. And he just gets in the back and he just starts talking to Professor Rachel, and she's just like, okay, how did she get in?
Mhm.
She's like,
Yeah,
hello.
yeah, and I think I cannot let this discussion end, which I think is not only the greatest scene in the entire story, but I think the entire best scene in Doctor Who ever. Ace beating the crap out of a Dalek with that baseball bat.
That's legendary.
Small human. Who you calling small?
I had to Google her height because I was like, how short is she? And then I was like, 5'3". Okay, yep, yep. I'm like, you go out with the baseball bat, girl.
I love
yeah,
it. It's like,
go
go ahead,
ahead.
Harmon.
No, that's what I said. That's what I like, is she's badass and she's willing to take, I mean, once he empowered that bat from the hand of Omega, she's like, okay, I'm good. I've been handed this weapon. That's not what he wanted her to use it for. He wanted to use it to destroy the transmat, but that she takes on the Daleks with it is just great the way she does that.
Well, actually, I don't know if he was just going to use it to destroy the transmat because he gives it to her after smacking himself in the hand with it and giving himself like an electric shock. So, and I think it's interesting because I think Ace, I think as a companion, Ace is interesting because um, she's very like she's not just the hey doctor, tell us what's going on. She's the no, I'm going to kick ass and I'm going to have explosives on me because I'm going to do that. She's very defiant, but she's also willing to like call people out on their crap. I mean, look at the
She's
way
an
she treats Mike,
anarchist.
you know.
She's got that 80s punk anarchist, like, I like has a very strong sense of justice and will deal it out accordingly.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think too this, Ruth, you talked about the whole racial angle. I think this is maybe one of the first times, maybe six, since the Daleks have always been used as a Nazi allegory.
Hmm.
In the first one, it's in the first story, it's, they're mechanized and all they want to do is destroy. You've got Dalek invasion of Earth where they're raising their arm stalks. And in Genesis, they actually had to tone down some of the Nazi imagery because it starts, some of the college are actually wearing iron crosses
Yeah.
where they kind of had to go, BBC said, nope, nope, nope. You need to tone that down. I think this is the first time they've actually been used in a way that doesn't dilute what they are. It actually strengthens the overall theme. I mean, what do either of you think?
No, I think so because first of all, it was the whole they really hit on the genetic impurity part and the genetic difference. You literally had a white one and a black. One side was white, one side was black. Literally, the one of their human goons literally uses the phrase like we gotta keep things like how do you phrase it? But he's like keeping things pure. And it was very Nazi. But even the one guy being like, Radcliffe being like, I was considered a traitor. And like, he literally had the most Nazi without saying Nazi
Hmm.
outfit. And it was just like, oh, he's a Nazi. And I
And
really,
that line in this episode about you have to where Mike is saying you have to take care of your own.
that was the one. Yeah. Where
Yeah,
he,
it's so subtly sprinkled throughout that when the Daleks come, it's like it it hits home rather it's not just another allegory.
no, it's very like, there's a, it's in there, but it like hits you over the head in advance to be seen. And I really do think it does kind of push buttons and that like you did like you're only a generation like removed from like the period too. So like I mean there was people watching it who were like, oh, I have relatives who are like that.
Hmm.
Like like there were British Nazis. Same with America. Like America had a Nazi league. Limburg was part of the Nazis.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like the
Hmm.
Nazi party was big, and then Hitler came, and then people found out what they were doing, and they're like, "Oops, gotta back away slowly."
Yeah, and I know I'm going to address the people who are watching on YouTube. Some of you may be thinking, "Oh, it's just more of your left-wing wokety woke kind of thinking." But let me show you a little bit of Doctor Who history. That in almost every Dalek story since the 60s, there's at least one human character who decides, "Hey, I'm going to work with the Daleks." So, Dalek Invasion of Earth has collaborators. Um, you in uh, Power of the Daleks, you've got Lesterton, who's like, "Oh yes, we're gonna serve as tea, and the Daleks are going to be our friends." In Evil of the Daleks, Maxtable is kind of working with them because he's got time travel. In Day of the Daleks, you've got the coordinator who is part of, the Daleks have taken over
Yeah.
Earth again. He's doing it so his family's safe.
Well,
You've
and
got
he also makes the argument that he's intervened and made lives better.
mhm. In Genesis, you've got Davros who thinks, "Oh, I can control the Daleks." In this story, you've got Ratcliffe. In Dalek, the Christopher Eccleston story, Dalek, Von Stratton is like, "Oh, we'll take this thing apart and we'll learn from it and we'll get new technology." And for those who are watching it with that kind of more right-wing ideology, let me just remind you, in those stories, the people who work with Daleks, it never works out for them.
Also, too, like the Daleks whole thing is like genetic purity.
Hmm.
How hard do I have to hit you over the head with it?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
it's
and in Remembrance, the people who worked with the Daleks are
mhm.
ultimately killed.
Yeah, and especially this came out in the middle of Thatcher's England, which was probably it was like Reagan's America and was really not a pleasant time. So to hit, you know, it's probably the most metaphorical raised middle finger in television history, at least from my standpoint. So, any other thoughts before we end? Any final thoughts? Anything we missed?
Well, just that wonderful speech when the doctor's talking with Davros.
Oh, that's a great speech.
We shall
And
become all powerful,
right,
crush the lesser races, conquer the galaxy,
Oh, you got the
unimaginable
arrow.
power, unlimited rice pudding, etc., etc.
right. And best that's one of those best moments for Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor for me. But also, I mean, he's pushing Davros's buttons, but also it's just like, yeah, he's finishing the sentence for him because it's sort of like something the Doctor's always encountered, which is, yeah, I've heard this before. And this is an example of where in some ways it's the same old thing, but it's done differently. This is why this show has worked so well for so long, is because you can tell a similar story in a new way. And even though at the end it's like, oh, it's Davros again, it kind of makes perfect sense that it would be him, and that that speech. I'm trying to think how to put it. It just somehow was the right capstone to this episode.
Mhm. Ruth?
Yeah, I was gonna say it kind of per perfect in that it's the whole we're going through the same cycle again and again. Like, come on, like you're clearly not learning, so let's try again. And it's
Yeah.
like constantly going through the same cycle until maybe something eventually comes along and he breaks through it.
Yeah, it's that line where he says, "Every time our paths have crossed, Davros, I have defeated you." And again, that's where he's also being manipulative. It's like he's warning him at the same time he wants him to go ahead and use the Hand of Omega anyway.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was gonna say just like overall, like this episode with it being said in like having during the Last Wars America and stuff, I was just like, oh yeah, that this feels so relevant even to today.
Yeah. And I think, and just to kind of bring everything to a close, I think that even though it's relevant now, I like that at the end, they're going into the church and Ace has, first the Doctor holds Ace back, like as if to say, no, 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 this isn't our place. Ace
Mhm.
asks if they did well, they did good, and the Doctor doesn't say, oh yes, we defeated the Daleks and we're wonderful. He says, time will tell. It always does. And I
Right.
think that really provides, I think that's also part of what makes the story great, is that it doesn't promise a happy ending. It just promises an ending.
And it goes back and it ties beautifully, like I said, with what he was saying in the
Hmm.
diner, where it's like, I have this big decision. And Ace is like, we did the right thing, didn't we? And the Doctor's like, we'll find out. But he's not 100% certain because he doesn't know the consequences of these actions. But he's as they would say later, like Peter Capaldi's Doctor and other doctors would say later in the new series, I try to do the right thing. I mean well, it doesn't always work out, but it's coming from the right place.
Hmm.
And even though we might fail, it's that we have to keep trying and
Hmm.
pushing through.
Did he have to let them get the Hand of Omega? I mean, he programs it, and what does it do? After it destroys Skaro, it comes back and destroys the Dalek Imperial mothership, and then it returns to Gallifrey. Well, then why couldn't he have just programmed it to go home? See, that's the thing. He didn't have to give it to them. He wanted to. So that again, that's this character is conflicted. This character is not perfect. That's another thing I like. He can be the hero, but he doesn't have to be perfect.
Mhm.
And on that note, well, we'll bring this to an end. I want to thank Ruth. I want to thank you, Harmon, and Barbara, uh, who had to leave early for coming. And for those of you watching, if you'd like to find out more about Chicago Doctor Who Meetup, we have a email newsletter. I'll make sure all the links are listed down below. But head to buttondown.email/Chicago Who Meetup. We do a monthly newsletter. The next one should be coming out. I'm hoping that this will be up by the 23rd because we'll have an event that day. But you're more than welcome to join us via email, and we do a monthly summary of what we're planning. Um, if you like what you've seen and you want to join us on Patreon, I'll throw a link in the description below. You can become a free member or you can become a paid member. And paid member, the only difference is with paid members, you get more perks. So, for example, we're holding a Patreon sponsored screening of Husbands of River Song in December. We're going to have a Patreon sponsored Big Finish listening party in January. Details to TBA because we still need to work out the details. And you can find us. We have a Facebook group. You can also find us on meetup.com. You can either look below or at the end card of this video. I want to thank Ruth and Harmon for for their time. Thank you for watching. And again, we'll be doing this every other month, so look for another video in February. No, in January. Well, at some point in the future, you'll see a video. Timey-wimey, wibbly-wobbly, all that stuff. So thanks, everyone, and see everyone later. Take care. Bye. Bye, all.